Welcome to Neurodiversity with Theo Smith and friends, where we dive deep into the stories of remarkable people on the topic of neurodiversity and neuroinclusion. Today, we have a guest who is not only redefining the landscape of candidate engagement, but is also leading the charge in making recruitment more inclusive and diverse. It's a passion project for them, and I love them for it. Get ready to be inspired as we explore the fascinating journey of our guest and uncover the secrets behind her mission to build a better working world. In today's episode, we'll explore the intersection of candidate engagement and neuroinclusion and learn more about the important work at EY's Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence, amongst other stuff, right? And start to uncover the innovative candidate journeys they've crafted and weaved into what is a global complex organization. So, whether you're a job seeker, a recruiter, or simply someone looking for inspiration, ideas, and to get underneath the skin of what happens in these weird and wonderful organizations, you definitely won't want to miss this. Gemma, welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Gemma, you are a trailblazer. And I mean, I loved chatting with you at all the different events that we've been at, where you've shown a real deep passion for wanting to improve the experience of candidates, right? And that's what I've always loved about it. And more recently, you've, I guess, pivoted that into supporting a piece of work specifically around neuro inclusion as well. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, who you are, what role you do. I'll give you a little bit of an intro there, but also that you're not just Gem, the Canada experience extraordinaire, but also a bagpipe playing mum with a unique individual perspective on life. Tell us more.
Oh my goodness, I've not played the bagpipes badly in a very long time, but yeah, I did used to. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a mum of two. Yes, I have two small children. Have been sleep deprived for nearly 7 years, so I think that gives me a bit of an edge. I don't know. That's what it feels like anyway. It keeps the buzz alive. And I've been in recruitment for nearly 18 years, which is terrifying. I am previously an agency recruiter. I did agency for about 8 years and then went in-house. And most of my background is actually construction, manufacturing, oil and gas. And then recently I've joined the wacky world of professional services, where I definitely feel like it's not my core area of expertise, but it has been a really interesting journey to be part of such a huge organisation. And I think candidate engagement, I've been in this space for about nearly 6 years. It's always been a huge passion of mine. Candidate experience, making sure that candidates leave with a good impression of the organisation, and actually the kind of inclusion side of it happened almost by accident here, and I just feel really lucky that I kind of got to be a part of it, and quite often reflect on the fact that it was just a serendipitous moment that allowed me to be part of this project. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
That's amazing. And so just, I mean, for the audience, not all of them will be recruiter geeks. What is kind of candidate engagement, and why, I guess, are these two now so crucial, kind of neuroinclusion, neurodiversity, candidate engagement, diversity more broadly in the professional landscape today?
Yeah, I mean, I think candidate engagement is very much like, the way I see it is we're kind of future-proofing the business. So, I don't think there's a lot of organisations who can say they've got strategic workforce planning down to a T and they know exactly how many people they're going to need in the next 5 years. I don't think that exists. But essentially what we're doing is looking at skill groups, competencies, and saying, traditionally, this is an area where we hire a lot of people, or this is an area where we spend a lot of money on agency, or this is an area where we know is maybe dwindling in terms of candidates coming through that kind of profession, and we need to work to make changes to that. And essentially what we do is we talent pool. So, we use a CRM system, candidate relationship management tool. We build communities, we contact candidates, we speak to them on the phone it's a bit of an agency mindset, having that kind of constant contact with candidates and making sure that, they know what's happening with us, that we know what's happening with them. And then obviously working with the business to say, okay, great, you now have this headcount. Well, we've got a talent community sitting with 1,500 people in it. Let's start there. And essentially, it's reducing time to hire and increasing quality of candidate because they're technically more engaged with the brand. And I guess as we kind of stray into that kind of diversity slant as well, it allows us to really understand the makeup of particular skill groups. I used to work in construction. It was very difficult to find female engineers in that space, and it's a bit of a systemic problem. So actually being able to look at larger groups of candidates, you can kind of identify trends and see where there are gaps and say, is there actually something we can do to affect change here? And then obviously work to try and put changes in place.
Wow, and that's fascinating because if I think about historically, we talk about the agency model. You have a lot of ownership over your group of candidates, right? So there's a huge potential historically for bias to creep in because if you're a individual managing every single applicant that goes through into that organization, your candidate pool, talent pool, how you engage with them, it's like a microcosm of a process and experience. And we know that, there has been a lack of diversity in recruitment agencies. There's been predominantly too many white young men, for example, going into the sector, and that fed into organizations more broadly. So what's fascinating about what you're telling me there is the concept around building these talent pools historically not managed effectively and not with the structure and systems and processes that you put in place could inadvertently create massive gaps where individuals just can't get through, right? They just don't get the jobs that they may want within particular organizations. And that can become really a big challenge for big complex organizations, because when you think about that on scale, that is a lot of women who don't get jobs in the instance that you described there within the construction industry, because historically the people feeding them in have never thought that they belong there because they've never seen them there. How does that change? How are you able to make the right changes to that whole process by managing it internally through the work that you've done?
We work a lot with our intelligence team, and I don't think a lot of organisations have a dedicated intelligence team, but we do. So, I was lucky to work with Lou when I worked in construction, and she works at EY now as well. And I think a big part of what her focus is and her team's focus is to look at what are the demographics within specific skill sets, within specific competencies, within specific regions, and actually using that to formulate a strategy of outreach. And that's something I think, particularly for NCOE, obviously the Centre of Excellence, that we really focused on. It was trying to target groups of candidates who wouldn't find us normally, who might see EY, who might not know who we are, but that would never maybe think that they could be part of an organisation like this. And that's a big part of what we're doing at the moment, is trying to understand what are these groups of people, where are they, how can we reach them, what kind of messaging do we need to put across to actually get them engaged, and how is that different to our traditional attraction strategies where we maybe are not attracting as diverse an audience as we could be. And a lot of that is around things like social mobility, technology poverty. Do people have access to laptops? Are they on social media? Do they have a phone? Are they using the library computer? All of these things, we're trying to use intelligence to frame out exactly how we reach every different area rather than just focusing on the places that we've always focused on.
Incredible. So data is really playing a huge part then in you being able to see where the gaps are and think, okay, how do we solve the problem? Which I think actually a lot of organizations possibly don't benefit from, like you said, to be able to have the team in place to go, well, we think this is where the problems lie. Right, now go and figure out how you can solve them based on the technology, the people, the systems, the process we have available to us. just give us an understanding then of, if we're thinking about those candidate journeys and we're thinking about those talent pools, give us an example of kind of what that looks like. Where do they go? How do you track them? How do you support them? And then I guess how you engaging and communicating with them with a way that is both accessible and speaks to them in a language, in a voice that they can connect with.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, being in professional services, we still do a lot of attraction on LinkedIn because that is where a lot of our candidates live. But if we look at particular areas, it might be that we have a big project ongoing at the moment and we know that these candidates don't really live on LinkedIn. It's actually very difficult to track them down. We also are looking for candidates who don't come from like a big four background, like an EY. So actually, we're looking at trying to ensure that we have that demographic covered. So what we do is we partner a lot with our employer brand team. We use market insights, Universum. We have a kind of we work with strategists to try and understand how can we look at those different demographics. In the past, I've worked with like Total Jobs, for example, and they've kind of given us an idea of where those areas of candidates might be located, what kind of, I guess, themes fall across those demographics as well. And then what we're ultimately doing is, from my perspective, we're looking to add them into talent communities. So I'm not looking to contact them about a job. What I want to do is say to them, if you join one of our communities, we want to add value to your professional career. So, for example, this project we're working on at the moment, this is for candidates who are kind of quite newly qualified in the audit space. What we don't want to do is share with them loads of content that's meant for someone who's maybe been in the profession for 20 years. So, we produce blogs that are more around what was someone in our team's journey to qualifying like? How did they overcome challenges about working and trying to study at the same time? What are our practical tips on managing stakeholders? You might be coming into a big four firm for the first time. What's it like here? What's the kind of what's the word I'm looking for? What's the kind of structure in terms of getting the most out of your relationships? And this is very broad value add content, which can be used for any company. So we're not trying to say, this is what works at EY. And by the way, we only want you to come and work at EY. What we're saying is, we hope that you will consider us in the future, but we're not going to stop giving you valuable information in the interim because actually that's beneficial to you and you'll think well of us in return. I'm very much, I think you'll probably know Theo Craig Fisher, like when he used to talk about the 5-to-1 give to take ratio, and I talk about that a lot. We try and always give our candidates on their journey 5 pieces of great content, value add content, before we ever ask for anything back. Like, would you like to apply for a job, or would you like to update your information, or do you want to have a call with us? So it's very much about trying to apply different types of content to different groups of candidates and making sure that it is relevant to them. And that's really difficult. And it very much ties in, see, with the NCOE piece around not making assumptions about candidates. And that's something that we work really hard on. It's like, create content that is, as I say, as broad as possible, that hopefully will appeal to as many people as possible, but not assume that that is all they want to hear about, or that once you found a campaign that really works, you just duplicate it again and again, because actually that's not how it works. You have to be really careful. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Probably too much.
No, perfect. So that leads us on to then the Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence. And just thinking about sort of through the conversations that we've had, I'm immediately thinking around accessible information and content, right? And we probably talk a lot about that in recruitment anyway. Variety is the spice of life, right? And that we don't have a one person who only likes a particular type of content, right? We all like to read sometimes. Sometimes we like to watch something and listen to something. Some of us need to keep our hands busy, like me washing the dishes whilst I listen to the radio. Otherwise, I won't take it in. It's like all these fascinating things about human beings and the wonderful human brain. How have you found that experience of working particularly on the Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence, moving away from some of the other things that we might focus on that might be around gender, ethnicity, race, age, different age demographics, to the neurological makeup that could cross all those areas and maybe much more difficult to be able to see. Well, what's that been like for you? And have you picked up new skills and ideas that have moved right into those other areas of the work that you now do?
Definitely. I think, like you said at the start, it's a passion project for me. I mean, I still have the Teams message screenshotted and saved in my notes because Sam Ramsey pinged me one day and said, I've just come off a call with Tanya Martin. She heads up our NCOE. This seems like it might be up your street. Like, do you want to get involved? And just being like, yes, I do want to get involved. And I think, my brother's neurodivergent. So he has Asperger's and ADHD. He's a lot younger than me. He's only 24. So I was already in my late teens when he was much younger and going through all of that kind of school and then, struggles through that. And then, he's been in the workplace for 8 years now. And I've seen how difficult it is for him to just, I guess, progress and have the opportunity. And he was really lucky that he found a company that saw his potential and took him on. But for me, it was like I couldn't wait to get involved in this project because I feel like neuroinclusivity is one of those areas where you can't answer it all. You can't find a fix for everything. You have to really think very innovatively about how you can appeal to the biggest group of people that you can. And that's what I was saying about not making assumptions. I don't ever think, my brother has ADHD, so he likes this. And therefore, everyone who has ADHD likes that, because I know that that's not true. I know from working with Tanya, from working, with other people who are neurodivergent, the way he likes to work is not the way that someone else likes to work, even though they might both have the same diagnosis. So I think it was very much when that kind of call to action came through about how can we, build this, Tanya says it all the time, this anti-recruitment process. It's about how do we build something that actually helps everyone, but is a lifeline for a certain group of candidates. And for me, that was the mission, was how do we build out something that is beneficial for everyone, but actually it's the make or break for some people to make it through a process.
And actually, when we consider that, if we consider that from a physical perspective, it's if we help somebody who has no left arm, they're unable to use their left arm. We also help somebody who has their left arm in a sling temporarily. We also help somebody who's holding a baby who can't use their left arm because there's a baby in it. It's that kind of, it's the most extreme element. We resolve it for there, but the broader impact is helps so many more people. And I think it's sometimes harder for people to think about that from a neurological perspective, because from a physical perspective, it's easy to see it and think, okay, oh yeah, I get what you mean. Or the left-handed, right-handed scissors scenario. But when we get into the way that the brain is processing information and working in an environment and what is triggering it and creating barriers for it, I think people do really struggle with that. So I find it really fascinating to take a deeper dive into that whole process and look at where people are struggling most. So on that basis, where were people struggling most for you, or what were the types of things that came out? And thinking of the really simple things, I guess, that maybe were surprising that you were able to adapt or that you were able to create based on some of the knowledge and feedback that was coming through.
So I think there was a lot of things, we had a standardized process that we used before, and actually the feedback was just that it wasn't quite fit for purpose. It performed a function, but it maybe didn't really elevate candidate experience the way it should. So I think the first challenge we probably identified was that the application process itself was not particularly neuro-inclusive, and that made it very difficult for us to attract the people that we wanted to attract. And I guess, and I should caveat this, we were in quite a fortunate position in that we had the CRM, so we bypassed the ATS. So that's not something that we would normally do. And I appreciate that not everyone might be in that position where they can do that. But for us, we had the CRM, we knew we could build something amazing into it, and we didn't really need to let the candidates near the ATS until we reached the point that we were kind of like doing the formalised process bit. So I guess
Just
we had that. Oh,
Just a moment there. So, from a listener's perspective, an ATS is an applicant tracking system where applicants would normally come through. The CRM is kind of either candidate relationship management or customer relationship management, sales relationship management, depending on what you're using it for. But
yeah.
sorry, carry on.
No, I should have clarified that. Sorry. So we were in that kind of luxurious position of having that, and I think one of the big things that was flagged was we needed to communicate certainties to this group of individuals. So if we had 100 people apply, we needed to set out the timescale. We needed to clarify when they were going to hear from someone, how long was the process going to take end to end, and that is actually around being very, very explicit in the information that we gave. And that's not something necessarily that would have been built easily into the ATS process, but it was something that we could build in to Beamery. So what we kind of took from the initial findings was that candidates just wanted to be spoken to, and they just wanted to know what was happening at all times, which, to be fair, you would think in recruitment is like the standardized thing that we do with every candidate, but it's not, unfortunately. So we had to look at how, one, could we deliver on the timescales? How did we set up to make sure that we didn't like do the classic overpromise and underdeliver? And then how did we make sure that throughout that the candidates felt like they had a point of contact, that there was a face, that there was a name, that they had escalation points, that we were not a faceless organisation, that actually we were people and we cared. And for me, when I got the brief, I took that anti-recruitment process and I just thought, we just want the candidates to feel like we really, really, really care about them, that we've taken the time to try and make it work, even if it's not perfect, and that ultimately, at the end of it, they will leave, whether they're hired or not, with a positive experience. And that for me was the main thing. And then looking at how the tech could support that.
Interesting. The tech. So we were talking about applicant tracking systems, CRM systems, and what have you. And I think technology can be a big excuse for why stuff doesn't get done. It can be a reason to look the other way as well. Oh, that's complicated. I don't even know how we would get that information, so we can't get that information.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, the information is there and it's available. It just may not be in exactly the format that you want it in, or it may take longer to get there, or it may tell you stuff you don't want to hear. What do you think about technology in, a big, complex, global organization? You probably have limited choices about what you can and can't do. Because of, I know the size and the complexity of technology could mean it can't enable you to do some things within the kind of the neuro-inclusive space or the inclusion space that you would like to do, and therefore you may have to find workarounds. How have you found that whole experience about making that shift into an organization of such size and scale, where your wings possibly maybe clip sometimes in terms of what you can achieve?
Yeah, I think it is difficult. I think in any organisation, tech is an expensive commodity. So, it's not easy to just, say, I would really like this CRM system, or I'd really like to change my ATS. It's not a small decision, and it's a huge cost. So actually, my kind of mantra, and I've said this at a few events, is like, become the master of the tech you have, push it to its absolute limits. What can you do? And then the workarounds come from what you can't do. And then that's where the human intervention, I think, comes in. So, we had great tech. We had a great piece of technology to use for NCOE, but we also had an amazing human team who were engaged, who were bought in, who plugged any gaps that technology couldn't support. And I think that is what's really key. If you've got, I don't know, I met someone at an event who didn't even have an ATS, they just worked off an Excel spreadsheet. That's okay. You can still do something with that. Can you Can you design FAQs for candidates? Listen, this is roughly how long our process takes, or these are the stages of our process. And I said this last year when I was speaking to a group of people. I said, a hiring manager never comes to you and goes, oh, we're going to interview this candidate, and you fall off your chair in shock that they're going to do an interview. Can you believe it? A hiring manager wants an interview. We know our processes. We know that if someone applies, they get screened, they go to a first interview, they might do a second, they might do a third. It's about making sure that you inform your candidates all the time about what is coming next. So if the tech can't support that, that's when you need to put in a workaround. We have an ATS, as I say, that's maybe not as friendly as we would like it to be in terms of kind of diversity. And that's where we used our CRM to plug the gaps, but we still needed the human intervention to make it work. We had very fortunate, we used conditional logic within the system. So when the candidate made an application, they chose the kind of content they wanted to receive. So it could be like video, audio, narrative, infographic, or all of the above. So they could have every campaign was designed in one of those formats, or they could have all of them, and it would be in one condensed email. What we were able to do though was, if someone got a video as their first touch point, and then they decided, I actually didn't like that, they could change it at any point. And the system, because of the way it was set up, the way we built it was that as soon as Theo makes a change to his application, the system just picks it up, and automatically you get an infographic the next time, because that's what you've changed your preference to. So I think technology has a huge part to play in neuro-inclusivity and inclusivity in general, but you have to really think, how can we push it beyond what we're used to doing with it? Can we be part of the roadmap? If you work with a smaller ATS, this is absolutely something that they would be looking at, that they would want your feedback on. Can you get access to beta features? We do this a lot with the CRM. They've got a new feature, we'll take it, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, great, but we want it. Is there a way to see their tier sheet for the next quarter? What product enhancements are coming in the next quarter? And how can you forward plan to make your candidate experience more inclusive based on what you know is coming, even if you don't have it right now? I think we've spoken about this before, Theo. Everyone would love to change a piece of tech. My tech doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it's got this problem, it's not great at this. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be something that you're stuck with in the interim. So it's about really becoming the master of it and deciding what you can and can't do. And then, as I say, adding in other things that really drive the candidate experience.
That's brilliant. And I love the variety of content and the way that you provide it in different formats, and that people can access it and then adapt and change, because depending on your mood, your energy level, you may normally prefer video, but all of a sudden you realize your brain is going 10 to a dozen. You may need to try and slow it down with reading something. It's about knowing yourself and being able to make some of those changes, which I guess that is the other bit around supporting the community as well, a better understanding some of the needs, because some of the people coming through may not have had the diagnosis. They may not have a label. They may not have had it spelt out to them. So therefore, they're going to have to learn by experience. And I guess that's another part of the community, right, that you build. And by sharing what you're doing and the steps that you're going to take, you enable people to start to learn themselves during that experience and engage with others and ask you questions. And that will enable them to be better next time, which may not be with you. It may be with another organization. But they're now better equipped because they've gone through a fairly robust, well-oiled process, which I think we need more of. And I think there's something to be called out about that as well. Every organization will have different technology. It will have different barriers. It will have different gaps. It will have different people with different biases. But if we can all start to make some positive changes throughout those systems and processes, candidates, especially early on in their career, will be applying for all these different types of organizations. We could be upskilling them one application at a time, rather than de-skilling them, devaluing them, taking their sense of self-worth and self-value away, which I think for a lot of young people can happen as they go through these processes because of the lack of communication, because of the lack of guidance
Yeah.
on what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. It can be really
Yeah.
devaluing and pull the energy away, and especially for those
Yeah,
who are
definitely.
already face barriers. So I just, sorry, I'm feeding back a lot of what you said to me there, because I find it very interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the things for me as well is like I was having a conversation with my brother about 6 weeks ago, and he was looking at making an application to a job, and he said, I'm not going to apply for it. And I was like, why not? Because it looks like a great fit for you. And he said, because they do psychometric testing and I'll just never get through it. And I was like, that's terrible that you feel that you can't even make an application. And I think to your point, Theo, around particularly candidates who are in the earlier stages of their career, when you put an application into a company, you land in limbo. It's like, I put the application in and I get a response saying your application's been received. You might never hear from that company again. That is the reality of recruitment. Unfortunately, there are some organisations you will never hear back from them. And actually, what is critical from my perspective is that no one ever feels like they're in limbo in that process. You've basically given, I'm a control enthusiast, that's what I like to call myself. And I hate the idea of handing my control over to someone or some organisation I know nothing really about, and letting them decide how I feel about it. And I think that's really important when you're dealing with candidate experience. No candidate should feel they can't apply because there's a bit of the process that will somehow exclude them, or maybe not go in their favour, or their assumption that that will be the case, because it might not be. It might just be my brother's assumption that he wouldn't get through psychometric testing. But I do think that's really important. If we think a fifth of the population are neurodivergent, we need to be doing more to educate, give people the opportunity to ask questions before they make an application. And I think that's where talent communities really come into their own, because as part of NCOE, it's driven a lot of what we are now looking to do in our talent communities, where we're like, how do we let candidates know it's okay to say, I need an adjustment, or something, actually, there's a case study, I'm going to need a bit longer with that, or can you provide me with the interview questions up front? And that's a whole other topic about interview questions up front. But these are things that we could be doing for candidates, and actually we need to work towards that.
Brilliant. And so what's interesting there for me is when I think about the work I've done with organizations and research and data that I've seen, for a lot of organizations, if we think about adjustments, reasonable adjustments, whatever you want to call it, whatever terminology, somebody needing something to help them do their job, right, is what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
we should just help them. But the reality is most organizations, or a fair majority of organizations, still the types of adjustments that they get predominantly to working hours or ways of working. That still predominantly for a lot of organizations is what people think of when they think, well, I need an adjustment. Well, it's because I've got kids, I need these hours moved, or I need to work from home a bit more, or they're the types of things that come into people's heads. So they don't then think, well, maybe I just need to have a different piece of technology to help me with writing content and spelling, especially within emails, where that can be problematic because I deal with customers, and that makes me feel a little dejected and like I don't have value when I keep making the same spelling errors I was making when I was a kid, because I still struggle with spelling, right? I'm talking about me. So people are not necessarily thinking about some even more simple adjustments than that to their daily lives and activities, and mouse pads and keyboards that glow up to make it easier to focus on the letters. They're not thinking. But when you create that at the beginning, at the recruitment process, when you create that experience, when candidates come through, and already you're providing them with variety of content, already you're providing them with the option to say, well, actually, I'd rather listen to that than watch it or read it, or I'd rather take it in 5 different sections of content over 5 days. It then becomes the normality that you can say, well, actually, can I just change this as well? Can we just adapt that? And most of these things are not costly. They exist within our current technology builds in some way, shape, or form. We might have to be a bit flexible. But I think that therein lies the magic, I think, of what we can achieve. So my question to you on that basis is, what would you like to see now with all the knowledge, the experience, with working for such a prominent global organization and helping them with this piece of work where so many organizations have not yet tread in that direction? What are you hopeful for? What would you like to see the journey of candidate experience? Where's it going to go in the next few years?
So many things. I mean, there's so many things I'd love to see. I think if I think specifically about my experience with NCOE, you know, it's very much how do we build this into BAU? You know, how do we take the model that was supported by a separate piece of technology and try and push as much of it into that standardized process as possible? And we're already having conversations globally about how we can make things better, and take some of that data from that project and then really trying to kind of look at making changes to how the application works. I think one of the things we're doing within the team is, like you were saying about adjustments, I hate the term reasonable adjustments. And we had a big debate about this because it was very much who decides what's reasonable. And one of the things that we said to candidates at the start of that process was, here are some examples of where we have made adjustments. So for example, if you need read and write software, you know, if you're dyslexic, if you need read and write software, that's something that we offer. We've got an assessment as part of this process. If you need, it's a take as long as you like. You have to submit it within a week. If you need longer, let us know, we can do that. If you need to have, I don't know, someone support you with just understanding the brief, we can do that as well. So providing examples, I'd love for us, I guess, to have very upfront information on our job adverts. I'd love to get all of our job adverts to the advert style of the NCOE, where we had it in all different formats with the video, the infographic, and everything like that. But I think ultimately, really nailing down that clarity of process and really communicating with every candidate so they never feel like they're lost in process is actually probably the most important step for us next. You know, we have employees, lots of employees who we've got a neurodiversity network. You know, they have gone through a standardized recruitment process and they have succeeded and they've become part of EY. That doesn't mean to say that it's okay just to keep going with what we're doing, because we still manage to attract neurodiverse talent. That's not how it works. What we need to do is continue to try and be innovative. And as I say, with technology, that's difficult. But I think getting the communication with candidates right is the first most important step. And then looking at how at every stage in the journey, you live up to your promise of being neuro-inclusive or inclusive, because it's great to put out a really inclusive job advert, but if you can't live that through the process, that you're not given a good experience. So how do you make sure that your interviewers are talking about the fact that if there is an adjustment needed, or if you want to share, you know, anything about your experience or anything like that with us, then we want to hear it and we want to make it better. So I think there's like a communication piece, there's a feedback piece, and then there's obviously looking at how we drive technology to be more inclusive. And I think that comes with being more agile, which is difficult when you're supplying technology to thousands of different companies.
Wow, that's a very good point. And I think there's something there about community, isn't there? So if we can engage the community that are being impacted by some of these systems and processes and get them to talk in a more holistic way, so that it's not about one organization, one system and process. It's about the candidate experience, right? And that can be across a lifetime, across many different organizations and many different applications. And certainly at the early stages of your career, it might literally be hundreds of applications as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being able to learn from those different experiences of organizations, from candidates and the journeys and the innovations that are happening, I think is really important. And I think the advent of AI as well certainly is having an impact on how we can create even things like FAQs, like you mentioned, where some people may have found it a barrier initially before they get the feedback from the candidates, and then they can start to build something, then feed in the candidate feedback and move on from there. that doesn't require
And
the modern tech solutions
yeah,
necessarily.
exactly. And I think that's key. So I talk about this a lot, like old school recruitment is coming back into fashion. You know, I'm really lucky. I have a candidate sports specialist on my team who is ADHD and bipolar, and she's very open about that. She basically spends her life engaging and speaking to candidates in our communities, and they love her. And you know, she's delivered her own marketing kind of journey. So after she speaks to candidates, they go on a content journey that's all written by her. It's all about her experience, what she does at EY, what she likes, how she has a positive outlook on life, how to handle rejection. She takes a lot of experience from her speed dating during COVID, and she shares a lot of. But the campaign analytics, they are the highest, most engaging pieces of content that go out on our system. So I don't think we can talk about tech and pushing inclusivity through technology, and I 100% support that all the time. But I think going back to just speaking to people, learning about our candidates, saying to the business, I've had a conversation with Theo, he's coming in for interview next week, he's mentioned he's dyslexic, just to be aware, you've obviously got a case study there, how can we make it better for him? That doesn't need tech. That needs someone to have the conversation with the candidate, to really take the time to get to know them and to deliver it back to the business, and for the business to say, okay, right, we'll make that change, we'll do something different. And you don't get that from anything technology wise. AI can't do that. So I think taking everything else out of it, actually just having that human interaction with candidates is critical.
And ultimately, at some point, they're gonna bump into a human at the end of that process when they start their job, right? Even with remote work and everything else, you still are going to be engaging and interacting with other human beings. So to completely take that out of that journey doesn't seem to make sense. But to optimize it for their individual experience, I think makes complete sense. Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a real pleasure. If people want to learn more about the work that you do, Jem, if they want to reach out, or should they not reach out? I don't know. If they want to join the candidate pool, what should they do? How should they connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm absolutely delighted. Anytime someone says neurodiversity, I'm right there for a conversation. So I think feel free to connect. Very much love the talent community generally, people in TA, because we're knowledge sharers, and if someone's doing something well, we want to make a difference across the industry. So I think, yeah, just reach out if you've got any questions. And if I don't have the answer, which I may not, then definitely there's people in the business that might be able to support. But yeah, always open for a bit of a chat.
And that's a wonderful way to end. And actually, it is a truth that the talent community have really come together over the years and work really closely together. So externally, you may not realize that about the recruiters within organizations really trying to make your experience better. Actually, we are a community that come together a lot to try and improve the way that we're working. And there's always limitations, budget constraints, technology, all these things. But actually, as a community, there is a lot of people trying to make the world a better place from that kind of employee space and recruitment space. So thank you so much, Jem. Very much appreciate the work that you do and for coming on and joining me for a fun podcast today.
Thank you so much. Lovely to speak to you.